The sweetest thing was the smile I believed was love. In the end, I'll tell you the words I wish I had said. Dear daughter, it's late, and the silence of the house feels heavy like a shroud. The pen glides across the paper, breaking the stillness, and I write this so you won't repeat the same mistakes I made. Back then, I was someone seeking approval. I wanted to be seen. I longed for the security that seemed to come with love. There was a loneliness that followed me, an echo of unanswered questions. And when he made me feel special, all of that seemed to fade away, even if just for a moment. It was a clear night, the car gliding down the illuminated road, laughter escaping our lips. He looked at me, and in that gaze was a spark that made me believe I had found my place. Then, he said something that hurt and relieved me at the same time, a gesture of tenderness laced with a hint of disguised control. I just care about you. I want to know where you are. The feeling seemed sweet, but I didn't realize it was bitter, and I didn't see that this disguised concern was a warning. But, of course, every little rule seemed like a conversation about care. He cared, and that comforted me. In the following days, those rules began to pile up. It wasn't just about where I was, but also about who I was seeing, the touch, the attention, and then the silence in discussions. If I disagreed, the tone of the conversation would shift. Don't you trust me? And I, confused, thought it was me who needed to change. If I stayed in line, everything would be okay. That's when guilt began to settle in. Silence became commonplace, and words of affection dissolved into subtle criticisms. I became a reflection of what he wanted, losing parts of who I was. And every time I tried to find myself, the confusion grew. It felt like love, but meant control. That's when I realized I was losing myself. The laughter became distant echoes, muffled by an invisible pressure. He was becoming more and more the center of my universe, and the sense of security I sought turned into a maze of unspoken rules. Each time he raised his voice, something inside me shrank. The warmth that once radiated between us now left me feeling cold. Then, during one of our conversations, he said, "You know, you can make me worried." In that moment, I smiled, trying to convey that I understood. I wanted to be understood, but deep down, it sounded like pressure. I bought into the idea that loving meant carrying that weight. That's when I saw smiles turn into weapons. A smile transformed into an expectation I didn't know how to fulfill. It was on a rainy afternoon that everything changed. The clouds had gathered, and by the time we got home, the atmosphere was already tense. We sat down at the table for dinner, and soon the little provocations began. A criticism here, another there. He said I was overreacting by worrying about my friends, that I should think more about him. That night, a storm brewed within me. I couldn't eat. The food was there, but my stomach rebelled. He looked at me with disdain and asked if I was okay. His tone was concerned, but there was a subtext I couldn't ignore. "What's wrong?" he repeated, and instead of opening up, I just stammered that I was tired. Tired of living under a gaze that seemed to constantly evaluate my worth. I didn't realize how much I was isolating myself in that moment. The silence was heavy, and meanwhile, he kept talking, explaining why I should understand his point of view, as though it were the only way to love, but I felt suffocated. And so, guilt began to take hold, and I didn't realize it. I was becoming an echo of him instead of being myself. In the days that followed, his words echoed in my mind. "You need to trust me." Each time he said that, I felt smaller and smaller. I spent hours wondering where I had lost myself. The space that initially felt safe began to transform into a prison. Every unanswered message became a reason for more control. Each friendship I maintained faded away slowly, until there was nothing left but the two of us. In this cycle, I discovered a part of myself that believed I deserved this pain, as if there were an invisible line between love and possession. And then, one night, the spark. He received a message on his phone, and I, without thinking, looked. It was from a friend, and surely, that exchange was nothing more than a common question. But at that moment, the sky came crashing down. Night after night, I asked for honesty. He yelled. My mind was spinning. That explosion turned into a storm of accusations. I was trembling, not knowing what to say or how to react, and with each of his words, a new pain emerged. It sounded like love, but it meant control. After the storm, silence returned, but this time, It was different. It wasn't a comfortable silence. It was an abyss. In the midst of the emptiness, a realization surfaced. I remembered the first time I heard those words. The smile that made me feel loved. All of this was turning into a nightmare. But the hardest part was realizing that I was also complicit. I had sinned by lacking boundaries, by believing that love was synonymous with suffering. The fragility of trust had become a trap, so I decided that I needed to stop. I stopped hiding in the lies I created to justify the control. The decision began to take shape. That day, as the sun was setting, I wrote a letter that I never sent, but from which I poured my heart onto the page. I spoke about who I was before him, about the vibrant woman I wanted to be again. I wrote about what true love is, supporting each other, growing together, not losing oneself along the way. And above all, I made it clear that I was no longer a captive. I had the right to freedom. I never published that letter, but the act of writing it was liberating. The journey to discover who I truly was still long, but at least now, I had taken the first step. And when I finally confronted the phrase I really wanted to say, it came with powerful clarity. I love you, but I need to love myself first. That letter was a turning point. But what I didn't expect was that the impact wouldn't be immediate. The transformation, like so many other things in life, would require time and courage. That first night after writing, I lay down with a lighter heart, but my mind was still tumultuous. The memories, not too far away, danced in my head like shadows, reminding me of the fragility of the freedom I sought. Days passed, and life went on. He was there next to me, but a part of me started to drift away. The smile that once enveloped me now felt like a distant reflection, and it was on one of those ordinary days that I noticed a detail that would change everything. As we had breakfast, the conversations were superficial, but there was a crucial point that I let slip by. He never asked about me for real. It was always about him, his worries, his problems, his need for control. The empathy that was missing in our relationship was becoming increasingly evident. "How was your day?" I asked, trying to break the barrier that seemed to have formed between us. He looked at me for a moment, as if he was making a real effort to understand, but soon he surfaced again. "Oh, work. The same old things." Frustration grew within me. I wanted more. I wanted to be heard, not just as a shadow following his orders. And it was in that small moment that rebellion started to bloom. That echo surrounding me could not be my only legacy. I began to remember the promises I had made to myself, the parts of me that I was willing to fight back for. That little spark of hope was slowly igniting. I decided I needed to seek support, and it was in a conversation with a friend, a distant yet caring voice, that I found the courage to finally open my heart. She listened to my outpouring and, in response, shared her own struggles, her journey to find freedom amidst the chaos. Looking into her eyes, I realized I was not alone. This connection brought to light something I had forgotten, the strength that lies in vulnerability. In that conversation, she encouraged me to set boundaries. "Love is not a prison, and you deserve so much more than this," she said, and each word resonated like a mantra. It was there that I realized I was not just fighting against him, but also against the image I had built of myself. The idea of change scared me, but not as much as the idea of staying trapped. With this new perspective, I began to practice small acts of affirmation. When he asked an intrusive question, I responded firmly, defending my space, even if my body was trembling. "I need some time alone right now," I would say, feeling the adrenaline rush, but also a sense of power. Each small victory piled up like bricks, building a protective wall around me, but the changes didn't come without resistance. He noticed, and when I began to realize that I no longer had the same control over myself, the tension increased. Our conversations became more heated. The criticisms grew sharper. "You've changed. You're not the same anymore," he yelled, as if that was a crime. That phrase froze the air around us. I looked into his eyes, and for the first time I saw desperation. It was a reflection of his own insecurity. That possessive gaze that once trapped me now seemed like a window into his own fragility. In that moment, I understood that his control stemmed from his fear of losing me, but I couldn't be the anchor that held him down. I wasn't responsible for his pain. Silence settled in again, but this time, it wasn't an abyss. It was an open field, full of possibilities. I saw myself moving forward, not because I wanted to hurt him, but because I needed to save myself. And as I walked on this new journey, I realized that each step pushed away the guilt that had once consumed me. In my quest for freedom, I rediscovered my love for myself. A soft melody began to play in my mind, a familiar tune that spoke of acceptance and renewal. I started writing again, not as a way to vent my suffering, but as a tool for self-affirmation. With words, I began to build not just my boundaries, but also my identity. I wrote about the little things that made me happy, about who I really was, far from the shadows of the past. Each sentence brought relief and empowerment. Freedom lay within the pages I filled, and every word was an affirmation that I deserved a love not based on rules, but on mutual respect. When I finally reached the point of closing that chapter, it wasn't with anger, but with gratitude. I learned that true strength lies in acknowledging my weaknesses. The awareness of what is acceptable and what is not freed me. In the end, the phrase I really wished I had said echoed in my mind. I love you, but I need to love myself first. And so, with that cutting and liberating revelation, I knew I had taken the final step toward my true essence. It was time to rise again, unafraid of the storms. I was ready to live for myself, and this was just the beginning of a new narrative. The weight of the words I had written still lingered in the air, but now, instead of a burden, they had become wings. Each page turned was a new chapter in my journey, and I was finally learning to fly. Freedom had a bittersweet taste, both sweet and sour, like a sip of red wine. And it was while I was rising again that I realized how much I had lived for others. Every choice, every effort seemed to have been shaped to meet his needs, while I remained hidden in the shadows of our relationship. But the light was beginning to shine again, and the fog of doubt was slowly dissipating. One afternoon, while finding an old box of photos tucked away in the back of the closet, I was overcome by a wave of nostalgia. The images reflected moments before all the rules and limitations. I smiled. I truly smiled. Within those pictures was a version of myself I had forgotten, full of dreams and hopes. As I touched the photos, there was a call, an invitation to revive that woman. And as I immersed myself in the memories, I realized that each laugh was an echo of who I wanted to be. My friends, those familiar faces I hadn't seen in so long, reminded me of the importance of genuine connection. The love I sought could not come from a place of control, but from something deeper, based on autonomy and freedom. It was then that I decided to summon them. I organized a dinner, a ritual of rebirth. As I set the table, a mix of anxiety and excitement pulsed within me. The aroma of the dish I was cooking filled the house, bringing with it memories of shared moments. I felt my heart race at the thought of how wonderful it is to be surrounded by people who truly care. When the doorbell rang, an explosion of joy washed over me. Those faces were like beacons. The conversations flowed, filled with laughter and memories, and in that moment, I felt the strength of connection once more. There were no rules, no expectations. There was only genuine love. But amid the celebration, a shadow passed over me, the memory of him. A pang of insecurity arose when I thought he might intrude on this moment. The internal struggle between fear and the desire to live fully grew. Yet with each laugh and every shared story, that shadow began to dissolve. Hours flew by, and the night transformed into a sea of camaraderie. I looked into my friend's eyes and felt the power of that connection. They weren't there to control me. They were there to support me. It was unconditional love, a love that allowed me to be who I truly am. And when I finally said goodbye to them, a new feeling blossomed within me. It was as if a chain had been broken. I no longer needed to return to a place of pain or control. I had found my place, a safe space where I could not only be loved, but also love freely. However, the path ahead still felt murky. He was still present in my life, and the thought of facing the reality that our relationship needed to come to an end frightened me. Old habits are hard to break, but I had learned that taking care of myself also means protecting my heart from what no longer serves me. As I looked out the window under a starry sky, I realized that true freedom is a process. One step at a time, and with each passing day, I was getting a little closer to being the vibrant woman I've always been. The past couldn't define me, and from that moment on, it would be me who wrote my future. And when I looked at those stars, I felt a spark of hope. I was ready to face what was coming next. And more importantly, I was ready to love myself again.